Hey, I'm Mark Posey. It's my wife, Delene Posey. And we just wanted to come and share some things that's been on, especially on my wife's mind and heart. And we've been doing some studying on it, and we think that it could probably help someone. We want to talk about the virtuous woman in Proverbs 31:10 through 31. And also, probably one of the biggest issues is submission, um, and the correct definition of submission, and how we should interpret it, especially if you're a young couple that's just been married.
Since submission has been, the topic of submission has been an issue in our marriage. It's been an ongoing issue that has caused some serious conflict in our marriage and has led to me wanting to leave a lot of times because I could not fit myself into the box that I was being told I needed to fit into to be a submissive wife. And so I think that that is something that we need to address, especially when we're looking at the church going forward, with the church growing smaller and with there being fewer young families going into the churches, and also with the divorce rate in the church increasing. As Christians, we need to be aware of what we are doing to cause havoc in other people's marriages. And we need to be aware of how we are not really supporting young women and young mothers to be godly women and godly mothers, and how we could possibly be causing damage in their lives. And so I think, that has been very much on my heart. It's been 13 years of my eyes being closed and just having them opened up and feeling really free, now that I have really understood what it means to submit to my husband in the manner that God says I need to submit to him.
And I think I wanted to add something too. When you said earlier about feeling like a box, you couldn't be forced into the box. It's not a box that I was putting on you.
No.
It's a box which is really important to what you can talk about, because it was a box that other people were trying to force you into.
Right. And what's important to understand about us is that I'm from South Africa. So I was never raised in America. I wasn't raised as a white person. I wasn't raised the way my husband was raised. I wasn't raised the way other people were raised here. I was raised completely differently. So I am an Indian South African, and there are a lot of cultural aspects that play into that. And every single Christian woman that I grew up around is a very outspoken, very strong-willed, very accomplished Christian woman with a very successful marriage, and they have helped their husbands in ministry, and they have pushed them, and they have been wonderful helpmeets, and I have been around those types of marriages that have been just such a blessing to me. And coming in as a young pastor's wife and a young mom from another country, and just really, really sincerely wanting to follow God in my life and wanting to do the right thing. I was so afraid of doing the wrong thing. And so I was in a different country, and I was in a place where I had no support system, and I was just willing to take any kind of advice or help that was given, even if it was not ultimately for my good. And some advice caused a lot of anxiety and depression and a lot of havoc in our marriage. And so I want to go through some of those, because when we give advice to young women about marriage, we have to understand that we are not part of that relationship. We are not the experts on their husbands. They are. And we are not part of that marriage. The marriage contract is between her and her husband. And the marriage covenant is between her, her husband, and God. And so, under God, when they are both under submission to God, together they then lay down their rules for their marriage and what they view as correct submission. Because when we look at that word submission in the Bible, it's used interchangeably with the word subjection, to bring into subjection to. And the word subjection is a contractual term, to be subject to the terms of a contract. So that marriage contract is not between anybody but those two people. And the only people that can define how respect is shown, how submission is shown, how they speak to each other, how they interact with each other, what kind of jokes they make with each other, how they flirt with each other, that is their own culture that they develop. Each family develops their own culture and their own way of doing things. And that is unique to that couple. And we have to be very respectful of that, because very often as women, we go in befriending the wife and giving advice to the wife without befriending the man, and not really knowing the man, just knowing whatever you are told by the wife. And if you are not an expert on that man, then you actually cannot give good advice. You cannot give good biblical advice to that woman about how she should subject herself to her husband, because you are not that husband and you are not the one that has laid out those parameters. You can cast judgments and you can have incorrect perceptions about how they interact in their marriage based on how your marriage is and how you and your husband interact. But that doesn't mean that that family has to act and behave the way you do, because they are called to a different purpose than what you and your husband are called to. And so we need to be very careful about that, because we have been very hurt by those kinds of things. And so I'm not even sure I want to go through some of the things that have been said about me.
I think you should. Because the reason why I say that is because there might be people listening who
Are strong.
yeah, well, strong, yeah, but they're going through the same thing, and those kind of things might help them connect to it.
Okay. Well, I am a very strong person. I was a very strong person before I met my husband. I was a very accomplished woman before I met my husband. I ran my own business. I had it together. And so by the time he came along, I knew who I was. I knew what I was. I knew where I was going. And he came along, and were you along for the ride, or were you there to change the ride?
Yep. And walks Prince Charming, right?
Well, the horse at least. All right. So let's go through that, because I think one of the things to understand is I grew up during apartheid. So I had to fight for everything that I had, and my parents had to fight to give me everything that I had. And I had to fight for equal rights, and I had to fight for my education, and I worked for that. I worked hard to get that. And so when you struggle to get what you have and to become what you are by the time you meet Mr. Right, then see, now you made me lose my train of thought. Then you're already, by the time he meets you, you're already a strong woman. So he did not fall in love with a quiet, laid-back, submissive woman in how Westerners define what a submissive woman should be. He fell in love with a loudmouth, extroverted, I guess, at the time, joking, cutting, just absolutely something else. I don't know how to define it.
Very outspoken, yeah.
Yeah, woman. I was very, very strong. I'm still very strong. I was exceptionally independent. One of the hardest things for for me to learn has been to learn to be dependent on my husband, because I was so independent. And I knew how to survive without a man. I could survive without a man. And I was happy to survive without a man. Didn't need a man. Very happy to have this man, but the thing is that's just the way it was, okay? And we raise our daughters to be very strong, educated, outspoken women, because we live in a world where women have to be strong. And most men are not like my husband, and most men are not like my dad, and most men are not faithful, and most men are a lot of things, even men in the church, are a lot of things that they shouldn't be. And there is no guarantee that my daughters will have marriages that work. Even if they marry the right man for them, we have no guarantee of what might happen. And so it's very important for us to raise them to be strong women who are self-sufficient, that if any obstacle comes in their way when they're older and have kids, that they are able to be self-sufficient, that they are able to take care of themselves, take care of their families, they're able to grieve and get up and keep going if their walls fall apart, because that is the way a woman has to be today. It's not like the Bible where your husband's family is going to come and pick you up and take care of you, or your husband's brother is going to come and marry you and take care of you. There's none of that happening. Mm-hmm. And so women have to be raised to be strong. And so we have these young women that are getting married, and they're raised to be these incredible, amazing, accomplished women. They are just absolutely, their resumes get them the best jobs and the best salaries. They are exceptional. And they marry wonderful, godly men. And then we start giving them unsolicited advice, dangerous advice, advice that is none of our business to give them. Because we believe they now need to, because they're married, become submissive wives. And so the woman that was so strong and independent and wonderful that she caused this amazing, what'd you call yourself?
Prince Charming.
Person to fall in love with her. You called yourself Prince Charming?
Yeah.
Okay. Delusional person to fall in love with her. She has to now change to become something else, because that's the messaging she receives, that she is no longer good enough as she is, and she needs to change. And so the things that attracted her husband to her have now become bad things. One of the things that attracted Mark and I to each other was our ability to insult each other. That is our love language. That is how we flirt with each other. Mm-hmm. That is, we love to insult each other, not just in private. We love to insult each other. We love to bust on each other. We think it's the funniest thing on the face of the earth, and we can do it with the straightest of faces.
And don't take it too serious. I mean,
and we don't take it seriously. He doesn't take it seriously if I bust on him, and I bust on him hard. And I take it a little bit more seriously if you bust on me. You got to be a little bit more careful, because I'm a sensitive soul. So I'm a delicate flower. So anyway, so we take these women and we start using their personalities, their strength, and their strong personalities, and everything that makes them who they are and attracted that man to them. We start turning them into negatives because we think it's wrong. But he never ever thought it was wrong. He loves that about me. Yeah. That turns him on about me. So that is what he loves about me, is that I can bust on him. And I'll do it wherever. I will set him in his place. That's one of the things he married me for. That's one of the things he used to convince me to marry him was, I need somebody who will keep me in line. I need somebody who will keep me humble.
Yeah.
So I do that. I do a great job at it.
Yeah, real good.
Yeah, I'm exceptional. So the thing is, just because our marriage culture is not your marriage culture doesn't make our marriage culture wrong.
Right.
Doesn't make our love language wrong. Because in the rules, in our submission rules, in the rules of our marriage contract that is between God and us, the guidelines that we have set up for my submission to my husband means that I have a very wide berth to operate under. And that berth includes that I get to keep flirting with him in the ways that made him fall in love with me to begin with. I get to keep doing the things that make me strong and make me me. And I can do that with his full permission because I am operating 100% in submission to the rules my husband has laid out. Is that fair to say?
No, it's fair. I mean, it's not, everything's not black and white. It's kind of like we were talking earlier.
We are.
You can't, yeah, we are. But you can take a man who might be more domineering and where you say, like we said, kind of have a wide girth of places you can function. He may only allow, say, well, I'm only going to allow this much. But with your personality, there's no way you could succeed in that. There's no way you could function in that and be successful. And so if somebody like that's in a marriage like that comes and looks at our marriage and sees you being able to go like this and say, hey, well, you can't do that. That's
Then you
not
can't
right.
control your wife.
Yeah, I can't control my wife, and that's not it at all, because I like what's happening. But, you know, they may say, well, you can't go way over here because, you know, she can't in her marriage, and that's being submissive to her husband. But over here, you know, as long as it's within the guidelines of what God has to say and has commanded, then who's that person to tell you can't operate? You know, this is what makes our marriage successful. You operate in what makes your marriage successful. And so if I like that about you and we have peace and that keeps, you know, peace in our home, the children are happy, they're learning, then what that's wrong to be able to tell that woman you can't do that. Maybe you can't do it in yours,
Right.
but to tell you that you can't function that way and then to make her think that she's wrong or she's sinning or she's done something against her husband or whatever, you know, that's just a terrible thing.
Right. And a lot of times when that would happen, I would go to Mark. And because I am trying to fit in this box that I was told I needed to fit in, that was so contrary to the parameters he had laid out as being okay, and was so contrary to my personality that I could not be successful in implementing that, we would end up arguing and fighting because I would get so frustrated at being a failure to measure up in somebody else's eyes, somebody who did not sign that contract.
Then it's frustrating to me because I'm trying to tell you, listen, you don't. It doesn't matter what they say. It doesn't matter. And then you don't hear me. I feel like you weren't listening.
I didn't
to me.
hear you.
And it's like, well, what? See, this it would make me angry because I'm like, well, who's this other person coming into our marriage, spouting this stuff off that has nothing to do with us, and wrecking what we have in place.
Right.
You know, and that's a very dangerous thing because it's something that never needed to happen, but it did, and then that starts ruining what is a good, successful marriage. You know what I mean?
Then the other message I've been given is I have to be lesser than my husband. I can't be accomplished. I can't be successful. I can't be whatever it is that makes me me. Great, wonderful. I have to be lesser than him.
Well, you are in height.
Be quiet.
A lot lesser.
Yeah, but I'm greater in brain. Okay, so the thing is,
Got nothing.
I know. So that's the message. I have to be lesser than my husband. And what people don't realize is who I was before. That I was great and I could have continued to be greater than what I was. But I have already made myself very small so that he can be great in girth.
I'm losing it.
Okay. Up here maybe. All right. So the thing is, I've given up everything so that he can be great and to walk him along that path. Because he's a completely different man today than he was 15 years ago. And that is because of me. I take 100% responsibility for that. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll give you that. I will give you that.
You're going to give me a whole lot more than that. All right. The next messaging I get is my responsibility is to my home. My responsibility to my home and to my kids and to my husband is higher than his responsibility to me. That means I have to be responsible to have the perfect home, the best disciplined kids, and to keep my husband perfectly sexually satisfied at all times. Stop that. In order for him to be a happy husband and for me to be a submissive wife. And so I would read every blog. I would read every advice column. I would take in all of this advice. And I would get so angry and so frustrated because I would be trying to implement all of these strategies and all of these things. And there he was sitting doing nothing. Well, you were. Because he was tired. He'd worked the whole day. He didn't want to come home and read a blog or try to figure out how he was supposed to change his marriage when he was happy.
Yeah.
Why fix what's not broken?
Yeah, and the thing is like if you're running around with the kids all day, you got the baby holding on to you nonstop, and you're tired, and the kids didn't do any of the chores they're supposed to do. It's the end of the day, I'm tired, you're frustrated. There's no telling what's going on at work, and you get home, and the one thing I don't care about is if the house is perfect. I don't care if it's spick and span clean or anything. Kind of like we talked about. You know what? If there isn't dinner on the table or anything, that's fine. You know what? Kids, we make sandwiches tonight. Mm-hmm. You know, there's no need to put all this added stress on there because I really feel like, if somebody loves somebody, they're going to understand what's going on. I may have had a bad day. I know it's hard on you because you don't even get out the house. At least I have experiences throughout the day. Mm-hmm. When I'm at work, I get away from everything. But as a mother, and I can imagine as a young mother, how hard it would be.
Yeah, look how old you're turning. Oh, gray hair.
There's a lot of gray getting there. But
look at yours.
How hard it would be. And that's an unfair expectation to put on a woman. Especially if you, again, it goes back to you have that understanding of, some weeks the house might be great. It might be clean and the food's there, whatever. Some weeks it may be a hard week. And it ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And, if the husband can come home and do something, that's great. If he's tired and had a bad day or something and stuff, and it's just not working.
He should still do something.
Then I still do something. Like me.
No, not like you.
But then you know what? Then you take it easy that night. You know what I mean? Yeah. The kids can eat peanut butter and jelly if they need to. But the thing is that it's not going to be forever, and you shouldn't put that expectation on a woman like that, especially a young woman who's just learning themselves. They're learning their marriage. They're learning how they're actually learning their parameters at the time.
Well, I'd say even for me, right? So we have a 13-year-old, we have a 10-year-old, and we have a 1.5-year-old. Mm-hmm. So there's a huge age gap there. So it's almost like I'm back in the young mom thing, but I'm also an experienced mom. And even as an experienced mom, I find it very, very difficult to, especially with the baby that doesn't sleep at all, to get things done during the day. I find it very difficult to get dressed before he gets home because I have some human clinging onto me 24/7 even when I'm asleep. And by the time I go to bed, I'm all touched out. And that's very, very hard on me. And so to put unrealistic expectations on me when I'm already drowning in what I'm having to have to cope with on a daily basis is not right, and it's not fair. The next thing was I must be obedient and quiet, especially in church or when I'm out in public and around other people. Because otherwise, if I'm not, I'm very disrespectful to my husband.
Again, that's other people saying that, not me saying that, But
But I do walk around like this 2 steps
yeah, but see,
behind
you trying to
people.
joke, make me look bad. Is all that is. But yeah, what'd you say? Must be obedient and quiet, especially in church,
Mm-hmm.
or in public. Well, I don't know. I mean, that's just crazy. I mean, I don't know what to say about that.
All right.
I'm usually asleep in church.
Don't say that in public. All right. If my children are disrespectful, then it's my fault because I'm disrespectful to my husband in front of them.
What's that again?
If my children are disrespectful, then it's my fault because I'm disrespectful to my husband in front of them.
Okay. Like we were saying earlier, there's, to that statement in general, there's a grain of truth in there. Meaning, like with my son, who's 13, if I'm disrespectful to his mother, or I talk down to her, or when she asks me to do something, I sigh, I'm like, God,
Rolls his eyes.
Next thing I know, and I know because I've done that. Next thing I know, I'm watching my boy. She says something to do something. Next thing he's like, I'm like, and first thing that comes to my mind is like, man, he got that from me, from watching me. And so there's a grain of truth to it, but also at the same time, I've known couples that have a great marriage, everything's great, they raise their children right, but all of a sudden, like one of the young teenagers, something that's very disrespectful to his mother, and it has nothing to do from what they've done. It's from what they've been exposed to. Even
Right.
I'm going to say, even at youth groups, at school, whatever it is they're watching. Maybe they're not in a cool group and they see the cool kids doing this, and so they want to be a part of it, and so they start acting out and saying things like that. We've had that problem too from the youth group, and so you see that happening, and so it's not always that case, and that again is not something that's fair to level
On a wife.
on a wife. Yeah,
Because the disrespect actually doesn't always come from her. And I will say for our daughters, with Salish turning into that horrible preteen stage, I've always said, don't let her disrespect you. Nip that in the bud. From the time she was being cute and sassy, I would always say, nip it in the bud. And Salish does not treat me the way she treats Mark. And that cannot be put on me.
yeah,
Because I have always nipped it in the bud, and I've always told him to nip it in the bud. So to put that on me, or because you don't like the way he allows his daughter to speak to him, because he likes it and he thinks it's funny, and he loves her sass, and he has very strong women in his family, very strong sassy women in his family. That's encouraged in his family. So if you don't like it that he allows that in his daughter, and I understand the problems with it, I can't change the fact that he likes that. But you can't put that on me
yeah.
and make it my fault, because that's not fair. Okay, the next one is I must not argue with my husband, especially not disagree with him in public, because heaven forbid anyone get the idea that he can't control his wife. But to me is, if you have to control me, then that's not godly submission.
Yeah, and aside from that, we don't argue in public anyways.
We hardly argue at all.
Well,
What's your real guys?
sometimes around the house, but out in public, and we don't argue a lot anymore. When we were younger and you're learning, we would argue a lot, but definitely not out in public. I mean, that's just. And if we ever get to the point where I feel this tension coming on, I'll just walk away from it.
Yeah, he's very annoying. He won't fight with me.
I mean, there's no point in arguing, especially out in public. But
Yeah.
but and that's another thing that comes from being married for a little while. You learn one another. You learn how you can make them mad real fast, and you learn how you can, kind of cool the situation out as best as you can.
Yeah, and he's very, very good at calming me down or diffusing a situation, because I'm really good at getting mad. Really good.
Very.
stop. Okay. I shouldn't belittle him or run all over him. And this goes back to our love language and our enjoyment of insulting each other and busting on each other. And we love that. And so it has to do with the culture of our marriage. It doesn't have to do with running over him. It doesn't have to do with running him. It doesn't have to do with making him small or any of that. He enjoys it.
Yeah, and the thing is like, that's one thing that probably stuck out to me out of the things I've heard and stuff. Because picking on each other is just what we do. I know a lot of people, probably most people would say that's not healthy and it's not right or whatever.
You used to pick on me really hard when we were first talking.
Yeah, but I mean, for me, I do think it's funny. I don't take things serious. I don't, we'll pick on my looks and stuff like that, and that's fine with me because you know what? Really, at the end of the day, I don't care what anybody thinks about my looks. I don't care what anybody thinks about it.
And here, you promised me that you'd always be hot.
Yeah, I care about what you think about it. But other than that, anybody else, if you don't like me and think I'm handsome, that's fine with me. I don't care. But the thing is that I'm comfortable in that, and so we can joke about it. Got a few extra pounds, that's okay. We can joke about it. Yeah, just a few. I've lost
100.
And, but, she knows the things that I am sensitive about, so she won't pick on that.
I wouldn't dare pick on that.
And I know the things that bother her, so I won't even go into that arena. But the things that we know are fair game and stuff like that, it's okay. It's fun.
And he has a lot of leeway to pick on me that other people are not allowed to pick on me at all. I don't like being picked on, but he has permission to pick on me because he knows how far he can go.
Yeah.
I must always be available to meet his sexual needs. We don't need to discuss that. No. All right. I must let him speak for himself. Go ahead, speak for yourself.
Yeah, well, here's the deal, too. And just to kind of go back to what I said earlier, I don't always sleep in church. That was just...
I have woken you up a lot in church.
But that's just because I'm usually tired by the time I get there from the week, and it's just whatever. But anyways, I can speak for myself, and if I am the type that unless I'm around somebody who's like me or like-minded to me, then I can talk and have fun all day. But a majority of people know, and so it's like if I know that we're not going to connect or have that kind of relationship, then I don't spend a lot of time talking, and so I enjoy people watching. I love analyzing every single thing that's going on around me, the situations that's going on around me. For me, that's just what I like to do. I'm one of those people that like to watch like that, and so I don't talk a lot, and I don't know. So she she'll.
I appear dominant when we're out in public or when we're around with people because he doesn't like to talk to people that he doesn't know well. And when we're out with other people, he sees that as my time to get out and socialize. So a lot of the time he wants to take the kids and spend time with them and watch them because that's his time to take care of them and spend with them because he works a lot. And so that's just the way it works. That's what works for us, and it's never been an issue for us. And if it's not an issue for us, then it doesn't get to be an issue for somebody else because, again, they're not part of our marriage.
Yeah, it's weird because I can go. It's like take church for example. Where I may not talk to hardly that many people. You know what I mean? Because I know that a lot of them don't really want a relationship with me, so I don't press it. But if I just go out to those.
You're so lucky that I want a relationship.
Yeah, if I just go to the store though, I can talk to any stranger. I like meeting different people and strangers and stuff like that. And so I'll strike up a conversation in a heartbeat with somebody there doing that.
That's true.
But other than that, yeah. So she does a lot of the talking, but it's not because I'm weak about that. It's just because...
And it's not because I'm unsubmissive.
Yeah, and it's not because she's unsubmissive or anything. But she knows our household. She knows our family dynamic. She knows what's going on, with our food, healthy things. She knows all of that because basically women run all that. You know what I'm saying? It's they really do. And the husbands are just kind of yeah, I'm here, But the women have got everything down, you know? And so when we're in church and somebody brings up a topic and it's in her wheelhouse, she's right on it. You know what I mean? Where I might be like, think about it for a second, you know? But she's like right there. And it's not a domineering thing or anything like that or her running over me. It's just how it is.
Okay. Now I wanted to talk about women who are held up as examples of submissiveness in the Bible. Strong women in the Bible. We talked about Sarah earlier today. And we talked about how she gave Hagar to Abraham. I would never do that, just by the way. But Abraham had a son with Hagar, who was Sarah's slave. And yes, Sarah had rights to do whatever she wanted with her slave and her slave's children. However, she was a married woman. Everything she had belonged to her husband. And so when she chose to get rid of Hagar and Ishmael, that was Sarah not being in submission to her husband because her husband loved his son. That was his only child at the time. No, it wasn't his only child at the time. They'd already had Isaac. And so that was still his child. I can't see somebody having a child and not loving them, regardless of who the mother is. They're still part of you. And so Sarah decides to get rid of Hagar and Ishmael. That is not the sign of a submissive woman. When, was it the angel or God? God, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so when God came to Abraham, it was the angel, right?
Yeah,
The angel of the Lord.
Yeah.
And so when the angel came to Abraham and said that Sarah was going to have a child, he would return in a year and Sarah would have a child, and Sarah laughed. And they said, who laughed? And, why did Sarah laugh? And Abraham asked her, and she said, no, I didn't laugh. That's not the sign of a submissive woman. Not the way it's defined. Not the way it's been defined to me. Not the way I've been led to believe that a submissive woman behaves. That's not a submissive woman. When I look at Ruth, and her husband had died, and Naomi tells Ruth and Orpah to go back to their homes. And Orpah follows for a while, and Naomi tells them again to go back. And so Orpah goes off, and Ruth goes, no, I will not let you go. Where you go, I will go. Your God will be my God. Your people will be my people. We know the whole story. She refuses to go. She has decided she is going to take care of this old woman, no matter what the old woman does. Because Naomi had nobody else. So Ruth took responsibility for Naomi. And that entire story is not a story about submission to Naomi and submission to an older woman. It is a story about how mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws should treat each other. And when we look further on in the story and we see Naomi she advises Ruth to go and lay on the threshing floor at Boaz's feet, because then he's going to have to marry her. A submissive woman without a strong personality is not going to put herself in a compromising position and then ask a man to marry her. They had a plan. They had a goal. They were going to get this girl a new husband, because when they did that, Naomi was going to get taken care of in her old age. And Ruth, in doing all of these things and following this culture, because that's what Naomi was for, was to guide this foreign woman through this culture that she was unfamiliar with. And so Ruth follows her guidance in all of this. And she marries Boaz. But he doesn't marry her because she is some quiet, never stand up for herself, indecisive little woman. She knows what she wants and she went for it. She was a very strong personality. When we look at Queen Esther, Esther was not a submissive woman. She had a very strong personality. In fact, she didn't want to marry the king. And in Esther 4, when Mordecai sends word that all the Jews are going to be killed, then, and he says to Esther, go plead with the king. And Esther sends a message back and she goes, no, he hasn't called me in 30 days. And if I go, you know what's going to happen to me. He's going to kill me. And because you know what happened to Vashti. And Mordecai says, basically, who do you think you are? You're a Jew. So if we're going to get killed, you too are going to get killed. And your whole family's going to be wiped out. And if you don't do this, then God will find somebody else to rescue his people. So you need to go and do this. So she goes and she gets dressed and she goes before the king. Not because she's submissive to Mordecai or her husband, but because she's trying to save her own skin. So she goes and God gives her favor in the eyes of the king. And she spends the next 3 times that she goes before him manipulating him and charming Haman and playing this game with him till eventually he's so besotted with her, this woman that wants to be with him, because Vashti didn't want to be with him. When he summoned for her, she didn't want to come, and so he got rid of her and he found himself a new wife. Well, here's a wife who's breaking the rules because she wants to see him and she wants to be around him. He has not experienced that before, and that beguiles him. He's got all of these concubines, but this beguiles him. Here is a queen, his queen, that wants to be with him, that wants to eat with him. And he's besotted with her. So he will give her anything she wants. At the end of that period, I think it was 3 days, he'll give her whatever she wants. And she tells him the story. And he is outraged that somebody would dare try to destroy his love. And Haman, his trusted advisor, ends up being hanged. Why? Because Esther did not submit to her husband. She did not submit to what people told her she needed to submit to. And so there is a difference in her husband's eyes. When she showed that lack of submission, he said, oh, let's change those parameters so I can keep you safe. I'm happy for you to come before me. Here's the scepter. You're safe. And so she was in submission to her husband. When he did that, she immediately she came into submission and into safety. He covered her. He protected her as her husband and her covering. He covered her. He protected her. He saved her life. And she was able to save the Jewish people. Not because she was submissive, but because her husband redefined the terms of submission within their marriage. And so when we look at Esther and we look at Ruth, we find that they were both first committed to following God. That was who they were submitted to. They were submitted to following the plan God had for their life, regardless of what people said. When Naomi said, go away, no, your God will be my God. All right? So they were submitted to the plan of God in their lives. Do you want to say anything?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So when we understand that biblical submission needs to be interpreted through the lens of God's plan for that person's life, and that biblical submission in a marriage is subject to those two people defining those parameters, not other people, and that it is covered by the lens of submission to God, then what culture and other people can view as unsubmissive actions are actually classified as biblical submission. That's how I see it. That's how I interpret it. So the first thing to me in a Bible marriage, when we have to define biblical submission or subjection to each other, firstly, the two people have to be submitted to God. The first person in that contract, the overriding party, is these two people are submitted to God, and they are joining their lives to pursue the will of God for their lives and to pursue holiness in their lives together. That is what they are submitted to accomplishing. That is the goal of their marriage, is to pursue Christ and holiness. What do you think?
No, that's
Okay.
right.
And so when they do that, then they are able to submit to each other, like Ephesians 5:21 says, because they fear Christ. You submit to each other because you fear Christ. And when you fear Christ and you submit to each other, then in Ephesians 22, as a wife, you can come to your husband knowing that he is submitted to God and he is going to keep you safe, because you have this definition of what you will and won't do and what he is and isn't willing to accept. And you can say, I am willing to submit myself to you because I know and I have seen that you will lay down your life for me. And you will lay down your life for our children. I know that you will sacrifice yourself and your happiness for me.
Yeah.
And so then she can submit herself to her husband. It's not a big deal, but they get to define how that submission looks. That is the freeing thing to me, is nobody else gets to define how that submission looks but them, because she is not choosing to put herself under any other person but this man that she chose to marry. This was her choice, not somebody else's choice, not somebody else's vision of what her life should be. This is her vision of what her future is going to be. Oh, that's a scary vision. But this is her vision. This is what she wants. This is what she wants to pursue. And then it's not a big deal. And so when somebody comes to you and says, hey, you need to submit to Mark because, you can't do this and you can't do that. And, because I don't do this with my husband. Well, I'm not in your marriage, and what you and your husband do is between you, and that's part of your marriage contract and the terms you've laid out for how he wants to be respected by you and how you show that respect to him and how you do whatever and what food you cook and what his allergies are and whatever his issues is and what he likes in bed and whatever. This is none of my business. Just like my bedroom is none of your business, my submission and how I show it is none of yours, because it's his business. It's between him, me, and God.
And I think another thing is how successful your marriage is. That shows that you have guys. I mean, because honestly, for a marriage to be successful, you both have to submit to one another, and then, like you say, you submit into God in doing that. And no matter what anybody else says, our marriage is great. It's been so many years, and that's great. So I think we're definitely doing right.
Okay. So I think that pretty much covers everything other than the Proverbs 31 woman. And I think if we go through Proverbs 31, if you want to find that.
Yes, sir.
It's where?
Oh.
If we go through Proverbs 31 and you take a young woman and you go, she's just married.
Yeah, it's like this. There you go.
This is what you need to be.
That's what you got to be.
This is the model of perfection. This is what the Bible says that you need to be a good wife and mother. Now do it. Nobody can measure up. You're reading it wrong. You're teaching them wrong. Proverbs 31 is a timeline.
Yeah.
It is a timeline of a woman developing and growing and being a wife and a mother in her marriage. And it takes her entire life for her husband to become a leader in the city. It takes everything she does over the course of her life for him to become that respected man that people will listen to and leaders look up to and everything else. It's her. It's her that's doing that. That's being his support. That's being all of those things that allows him to stand up at the city gates and be noted and be known and respected, because she's there taking care of everything else. And he knows he can trust that. He knows that if the income is low, she's going to go get a job and help. He knows that if she needs to stop and she needs to take care of the kids, then she's going to do that. he knows that whatever needs taking care of, she will make the sacrifice to do that so that he can become who God intended him to be.
Yeah. And I think that's the most important thing, like you said, is the timeline, because I don't think I've hardly ever heard it explained from woman to another woman that it's not something that it's condensed down and you have to do it in your first year of marriage. It's something that's over a span of time. The fact that her husband, when they got married, her husband wasn't a leader, and he didn't all of a sudden just become a leader because he married her. Her children will rise up and bless her. Well, that means she had to have all of her children, they had to get raised to be able to do that. That's over a span of time. That's a whole lot of learning that she had to go through. That's all of these things, learning how to make clothes, traveling like a merchant ship, traveling far to get the best foods for her family. I mean, this is something that you learn over time. And you become, towards the end of your life, you may look back and say, wow, okay, yeah, I was all those things.
I hit it. I did it. I am a virtuous woman.
Yeah. But you can't.
Are a lucky man.
Yeah, I am.
Now call me blessed.
Yeah, hey. But it's unfair to dump take a woman who's a little bit further along in age, who's have all that experience, to dump even what took her years and years and years to learn how to be, to all of a sudden dump that on a young wife, is way too much. Because that's years and years and years of acquiring these skills and how to become a good, a woman like that. Right. And then to expect that's just unrealistic.
Right. Well, I think that pretty much sums up everything I feel I needed to say. But if I had to say anything to a young woman or a woman feeling condemned and feeling that she just can't get it right and she is not good enough and maybe she's the wrong woman for her husband because she can't fit the box that she's being told she needs to fit in, the only message I would give is you are good enough. You are the right woman. Your marriage is between you, God, and your husband. Block out the voices. Block out the well-intentioned voices. Listen to your husband's voice and let his voice get loud. Listen to him. Believe him when he tells you you are what he wants. Believe him when he tells you that you are doing enough. Believe him when he says ignore those other women. Believe him, believe him, believe him, because what you're doing is good enough for him and he loves you for what you're doing. But if you listen to those other people, you will be turned into somebody that he did not marry and he does not love. Listen to your husband. You are good enough. You are a good enough mom. You have been equipped already before you and your husband came together. God had already planned you to be your husband's wife. He had planned you to be the mother of your children. You were equipped. Whatever your child is struggling with, you are equipped to deal with it. You may have to read, you may have to study, you may have to have God enlighten things to you, you may have to ask for a little bit of help. But as soon as you feel God go, yes, that's it, listen to him. Listen to him because you are good enough and you are equipped and you are able to be a good wife and a good mother, and you are a virtuous woman. Whether you're down in your journey or you're just beginning your journey, you already are a virtuous woman.
That's right. Talked over me the whole time.